The world waited yesterday for the telephone conversation between President Trump and President Putin, and indeed whether that telephone conversation would take place. But the problem is, even looking through the sort of the history of manipulation, this recent telephone call between Trump and Putin stands out as it stands out in the testimony of his perilous dance of diplomacy and power as something absurd. Because Putin, even when dead, can talk the hind legs off the back of a donkey, and emerging from a 90-minute discourse with an accord, you have to ask who benefits, who got the best out of that. Well, Russia. Russia consents to a 30-day cessation of assaults on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, having destroyed most of it. And this agreement conspicuously sidesteps a comprehensive ceasefire, thereby permitting the continuation of hostilities against Ukrainian forces and civilian locations, and the ink could scarcely dry on this tenuous pact when within mere minutes Kyiv found itself besieged by a barrage of Russian drones, underscoring the fragility and perhaps the futility of any agreement like this. Ukraine, steadfast in its commitment to peace, industrious in its ingenuity, already looking at alternatives to the Kursk invasion. It was making headway towards Belgorod last night. It finds its strategic options are hamstrung by this accord, which is signed without it even being present, because the accord effectively precludes retaliatory strikes against Russian energy assets. It precludes it sort of, there's a sort of gentleman's agreement which Ukrainians understand, Russia doesn't. And Russia retains this unbridled latitude to target both retreating Ukrainian troops and civilian infrastructure, laying bare the asymmetrical nature of this so-called peace, brokered by a thug in a wig behind the Resolute desk who thinks he's good. He's not. He's a fool. He's either hand in glove with Putin, or he's being manipulated by Putin. One or the other. But Trump is not producing a deal that is any way fair, right, or effective. This arrangement appears less a genuine pursuit of peace and more a stratagem that panders to the egos of two mastigophorous leaders, Trump and Putin, each wielding the whip of dominance, the scorns and whips of time. Trump, in his quixotic quest for a Nobel accolade, seems oblivious to the inequities of this deal, while Putin, ever the tactician, exploits the situation to further his imperial ambitions. And the Russian population, far from acquiescing to this state of affairs, has manifested its dissent through widespread unrest. Why don't we notice that? The Noon Against Putin initiative, inspired by the late opposition leader Alexei Navalny, saw thousands casting votes against Putin or spoiling their ballots during the 2024 presidential election, desperate to make a point, despite the spectre of legal repercussions, and yesterday or the day before, out in the streets. This civil disobedience is emblematic of a society chafing under the yoke of autocracy, yearning for a world where the oppressor's wrong and the insolence of office are all but distant memories. But now we see that those levers of unrestrained power are being controlled by the US administration in Washington as well as by the Kremlin. The Kremlin's response to the dissent, by the way, has been particularly draconian. The Anti-War Committee of Russia, established by exiled public figures to oppose Putin's regime and the invasion of Ukraine, has been designated an undesirable organization, further stifling organized opposition. Moreover, the harrowing plight of journalist Maria Ponomarenko, who, after enduring relentless harassment in prison, resorted to self-harm, cast a stark light on the regime's unrelenting suppression of dissenting voices. And yesterday, I did a report about Oxymiron, whose character is besmeared by the Kremlin, with innuendo and accusations that he cannot answer. And it's in the theatre of international diplomacy. This episode evokes the timeless lament of Hamlet, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes when he might his quietus make with a bare bodkin. Well, Maria Ponomarenko has demonstrated that, and Ukraine stands at a crossroads under the insolence of office and the spurns of the patient, bearing the weight of an unjust peace, its sovereignty undermined by the external machinations of thugs, either those who've declared war against it or those who declared an alliance. The international community must recognize that a peace predicated on inequity is a prelude to further discord. True peace can only be forged through genuine dialogue, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to justice. And the people involved in the peace talks need to be the people on the ground. They need to be the nations who are contesting the space. Not to have Zelensky in the room is an absurdity, or on the phone is an absurdity. The idea that Ukraine can be portioned out by two old farts on a telephone in 90 minutes is simply absurd. As I say, this is about whips and scorns and flatulence.